Okay, so let me start the event. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. We're excited to see you all from all around the world. It's really exciting. We usually do the event in person in Philadelphia oh yeah, and so shout out in the chat if you are the first time joining in and first time joining the PhillyCHI event too. We'd like to know that. We usually do that do our event in person in Philadelphia, but then due to COVID situation, we do it online, and it's been doing that since April, I think, and this is our last event. And this really give us opportunities to open up the event and in the more global scale. So we all thank you for your support. Welcome to World Usability Day. The theme of this year is human-centered AI. This year, as usual, we theme up with Bresslergroup, the fine folks from Bresslergroup, to honor their World Usability Day, which was on November 12th. The goal of World Usability Day is to raise standards so that technology works to harness human potential. Tonight, we will hear awesome talk from Vinita, and she comes from Chicago, which is very exciting. Marli, she comes from Boston, and Christopher is our local designer here, come from Bresslergroup, who will be sharing their talk relating to usability and human-centered AI, which is the theme of this year. So let's talk about a little bit schedule for tonight, guys. We're gonna do a little bit intros and event overview. We're gonna talk about who we are and what PhillyCHI stands for and stuff. And we're gonna kick it off with their presentation at 6:50, and then we will wrap it up with the raffle at the end. So stay tuned to the end. You're gonna receive some awesome books from our sponsor, Roosevelt. And with that, I'm gonna hand off to my brand and content strategist, Ben. We will talk about who we are.
Yeah, thanks, Chong. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Swafford. We like to share a little bit about PhillyCHI, especially for people who haven't been to an event before. And looks like that's a lot of people in the chat, so welcome. Definitely glad to have you here. So PhillyCHI has been organizing meetup style events for the local UX community for 15 years, actually. PhillyCHI's purpose is to connect the UX community. We're dedicated to knowledge sharing, building a strong community, and providing educational programming and networking opportunities to everyone who works in UX, studies it as a student, or is just enthusiastic about user experience and related fields. We're also committed to supporting a respectful environment. So if you witness any disrespectful behavior, please let us know either in the chat or by reaching out to us through email or social media. And if you'd like to see our code of conduct, it's on our website. So this is our 2020 PhillyCHI board. This is the team that's been organizing the events this year. Chong is the chair, Christine's our vice chair, Lorraine is treasurer, Michelle is social media strategist, and I am content and brand strategist. Unfortunately, a lot of these guys will not be staying on next year. This is their last event. So gonna miss you all. We have 3 seats to fill for next year. So that's what this slide is about. It's a great opportunity to join and give back to the local UX community in PhillyCHI. We're looking to fill these 3 spots. This is really a valuable thing. It's been awesome for me this year. I'm excited to stay on next year. So if you've appreciated these types of events, this is a great opportunity to learn how they run and how they function, to impact how it's going to work in the future. And it's a great way to get your name out there in the UX community in Philly. The time commitment is about 10 hours per month, give or take. We meet up virtually every week to organize things. So yeah, if you're interested, you can find the form to apply on our website or in our emails and social media. The applications are actually due on Monday. So please apply and reach out if you have any questions. All right, Lorraine, over to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Lorraine and I'm the treasurer of PhillyCHI for 2020. We want to let you know and invite you to fill out our end of year PhillyCHI survey that will be sent out end of this week. And we'd like to hear from you and know what you thought about PhillyCHI in 2020. So what events do you liked the most and the least, least, and why? What you'd like to see change in 2021, if anything, and then any other great ideas to make PhillyCHI even better. Just know that we really appreciate your time. So look for that to come through your email. And next slide. All right, so we'd like to do what we call job time, where we try to connect those who are hiring with those who are looking for a job. We are a Philly-based organization, so we do tend to stick to Philly area jobs, although I know COVID has really shook things up. But for now, if there's anyone who has a job or if their company is hiring and you'd like to share that, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll unmute you and allow you to share that position.
Lorraine, I have a job to share.
Okay, go ahead.
So, so I work for Comcast as a voice designer, and if we're having our one opening, we're looking for a UX multimodal designer who's gonna work with within our team. Our team is called Sensory Design Team. We pretty much work on the space between products and the user. So you are able to design and solve problem in multiple ways, not only on the screens, but on the voice, on haptics, on the graphics, like in multiple ways in between the space between user and the product, which is really exciting. And so one of their job, like this position, my dream position when I first started in Comcast. So if you are interested, please reach out to me and I will share the job description and connect you to the right person. Okay.
Thank you. Also, if you are looking for a job and if you'd like to share your LinkedIn in the chat, feel free to do that. And also, is there anyone else who'd like to share a job that you're aware of?
I can speak a little bit. So I work for a company called Elsevier. They are a Dutch company that works in the space of healthcare publishing. And they have a suite of technological projects that help educate nurses or medical students going through school, and also clinical decision support tools. It's a really interesting and awesome place to work. I know that we have a handful of roles. I'm not sure of all of them off the top of my head, but if you do a search for Elsevier and jobs, you can hunt them down pretty easily. Same as Chung, feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in Elsevier.
Great. I see that we've got some LinkedIn profiles coming through the chat, so that's awesome. I don't see anyone with their hand raised to share any other job descriptions, so we might want to keep moving. All right, over to you, Christine.
Awesome. Hi, as Ben said, I'm Christine and I am the Vice Chair of PhillyCHI for 2020. I want to talk a little bit about our speakers tonight. Joining us are Vinita Atre. She's a UX designer at Wonderlic, based in Chicago. Next, we have Marli Mesibov. She is a lead content strategist at Verily Life Sciences out in Boston. And then we have Christopher Kim, Director of Human Factors and Usability at Bresslergroup. So thank you to all of our amazing speakers tonight. I know we can't wait to hear your talks. Next slide, please. Excellent. So next we're going to talk about webinar logistics. These are just some ground rules that we'll be asking you to abide by for the call. Observers will be muted by default and your video will be off. Please use chat for general discussion and comments. If you have questions for the panelists as they're speaking, please use the Q&A feature. This allows us to be able to see your questions really clearly and also provides the like feature. The like feature allows you to upvote the best questions, the questions that you want to be heard, so that they are more likely to be answered. Lastly, the event will be recorded and shared online via our YouTube channel. And I'm handing things off to you, Michelle.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christine. So hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Colon. I am the social media strategist for PhillyCHI. And we want to take a moment to thank Bresslergroup for being our event sponsor this evening, and also wanted to thank the rest of our 2020 sponsors, Think Company, Slalom, Guru, Vanguard, Harrisburg University, Drexel College of Computing and Informatics, and Rosenfeld Media. Alrighty, and as Chong mentioned earlier, we will have a raffle at the end of all of the presentations. So hang out with us, stick with us till the end for a chance to get one of these books sent to you. And we'll be reaching out to the winners to collect addresses so we can send physical copies of the book. So that's all I have on that. And I want to go ahead and introduce or reintroduce Vinita, UX designer at Wonderlic. And Vinita, whenever you are ready.
Hi, I'm Vinita. I'm a UX designer and researcher at Wonderlic. I work in the HR tech space, where I've been working with products using machine learning and normal software engineering. So I'll start by sharing my screen. All right. So thank you for the opportunity. Today I will be talking about how collaboration between UX designers and data scientists can help us design AI futures. So a little bit about myself. I'm a product designer. I want to talk a little bit about my motivation as an interaction designer. I really aim to reduce the gap between the potential of technology and human problems. And for me, design is empathetic, experimentative, and helpful. So let me begin by defining what co-design is. So today I'll be talking about how co-designing between UX designers and data scientists can benefit AI and machine learning products. So let's start by defining co-design. Co-design is actually a very old concept. It's from the 19th century. It's often used as an umbrella term for participatory design, co-creation, which often involves co-creation with customers, and for other open design processes. It's used by a lot of companies, some of them being IDEO, the design organization, BMW, DHL, so on. Now let's talk about how can we identify opportunities between UX design processes and machine learning processes, which, if you look at a first glance, are very distinct. So I'll start by just outlining a normal UX design process. So using the double diamond philosophy from design school, we have the discover stage, where you work with the users. Then we have the define stage. Then there's ideate. Then prototype and test, and it's an iterative cycle. At the end, you will deliver particular designs that solve the problem. And you will be monitoring how these designs are working out in the real world. Now let's look at the machine learning process. This is a simplified model of the machine learning process and in nowhere exhaustive. So a simple machine learning process may involve data collection, designing a machine learning model, and then even after designing the model, there are various processes where you have to optimize the model, train the model. So I'm calling those as modeling processes. Then it involves deploying this particular model in real time. And then when it's deployed, it'll be making predictions. Now think about how we can combine these two processes. Let me begin by stating that the result of discover phase and the define phase, which narrows down on the problem space and helps the ideation, can also guide collection of the data, finding the right data sets. And I'll be going in depth over these later on. How a particular model works. So the design of the model can also help produce new ideas that can be potential solutions to the problems. A lot of how the modeling process works, the new insights that are uncovered after training the model can also help guide the prototypes and how the prototypes could be improved. We also want the prototypes to be as real to the machine learning's behavior as possible, so the outputs of the modeling process can help create a more realistic prototype. And in turn, what we find out from prototyping and testing with users can also point out crucial points in user testing that can influence the modeling process or how the model is being trained. After the delivery of the design is launched. Let's say it's out in the wild and the model is deployed. At this point, the model and the software, they will be talking to each other. So the software will be, let's say, onboarding the users to the machine learning model. So there will be interaction. And as the model is making predictions, the software will try to monitor and see the behavior. Is it making good predictions? Are users acting upon the predictions or the suggestions given by the model to them? And in turn, the monitoring will help make better predictions. Monitoring sometimes can also lead to ideation of new solutions, which can also be another iterative process. Now let's dig into each of these stages and try to identify some UX processes, some UX activities that we are familiar with and how they can help us to collaborate better with data scientists when designing machine learning-led products. So in the first stage of discovering user problems and opportunity areas, one of the generative methods, some of the generative methods like contextual inquiry, user interviews, and surveys can help understand the user and the context of the use, which is very crucial in defining machine learning models. It can help understand the problems to make sure that the machine learning model is actually solving problems that are deeply rooted in human needs. There is also a very good question before trying to integrate any machine learning model or AI. It is to assess whether the particular model will help by augmenting or enhancing the user or by automating the process and making the process independent of the user. So trying to assess this need by investigating the problem is a good start. Some other methods can be used when a particular system is already in place. You can use Wizard of Oz types prototypes, which basically involves enacting where an expert user will try to enact as if they are the AI expert and the user will try to play with the prototype. This can be a digital prototype or a paper prototype. And we can also use user interviews where we can ask them about how they feel about the current tool which uses AI and machine learning. How do they feel about using it in the various contexts that they use, and try to gauge what their mental models are about the existing AI and machine learning models. A third approach we can also take is do collaborative DEX research and secondary research to try to uncover what the strengths of machine learning are and what the weaknesses are. The goal is to identify how AI can solve the problem in a unique way. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to show the slide, but there are some issues happening, so I'm going to try to show it through my browser. Let me know if you guys have trouble reading. So after the discover phase, we have the define phase. In the define phase, artifacts like personas, user flows, and user scenarios can really help build a common understanding of the user and also their mental models. It can identify opportunities for machine learning intervention. By creating use case scenarios and user flows, we can identify pain points where machine learning is a strength compared to humans. Co-creating standards in a checklist is another way by involving various stakeholders such as data scientists and UX designers. We can align on design principles and AI ethics that the team agrees on. And creating a checklist makes it more easier for practitioners to actually implement these. There has been a lot of research which suggests that checklists are more effective than principles, which at times seem to be more abstract to practitioners. So creating a kind of a checklist for the various stages is a good idea. Next is shared templates. So based off the research, we can also create few interesting design opportunities by framing them as how might we questions. How might we's is a very popular design exercise in Google's design sprint activities. For making sure that data collection and evaluation is fair, there can be templates that can be used to translate user needs into data needs. Pair with Google is a program which has a good template that can be used. Next is ideating solutions. So let's say you've defined the problem space and now you are looking to define solutions. Co-ideation activities like Crazy Eights generate a huge number of ideas very quickly, and it's a great exercise to engage diverse stakeholders. So I highly encourage that you do that. Some low fidelity prototyping like paper prototyping, storyboards, and role-playing can also be used to present design ideas. This helps create design ideas very quickly. Abstracting ML concepts is a way to present an ML concept in a very easy to understand way. D-School has a few cards, they call them AI ML cards that they use to abstract these ML concepts. So understanding the abstracted version can help create low fidelity prototypes, get feedback from on these ideas, manipulate these ideas quickly. Next, during the ideation process, a sort of design review can also be done, and it can be based on the previously co-created checklists. At this point, also understanding where the machine learning model might fail or what type of errors and failure states might arise is good to know. After ideation, let's talk about prototyping and testing. A few ideas that have been selected from ideation further go into a more rigorous process of being prototyped. This can be higher level prototypes. and can be tested with real users outside. Making sure that high fidelity prototypes are created is a big challenge when using machine learning-led products. To overcome this, there have been certain tools that are out there. Again, there is a lot of research that still needs to be done. But something that we can still leverage is using or creating interaction design paradigms, standard interaction design paradigms, to make sure that we're able to explain the outcome, to make sure that we're able to instill trust. We also need to make sure that the effect of the model on the users and the decisions that make is controllable. In the prototype and testing phase, another key element is not just conducting qualitative testing, but also making sure that user well-being or user satisfaction can be quantified. So a lot of data scientists create reward functions, and they have metrics for which they optimize. As designers, if we are able to create some metrics and represent user well-being and satisfaction through them, we'll be able to communicate with our peers in data science much better. We'll also be able to drive creation of a more human-centered AI. Also, if we are able to model user satisfaction as UX designers, it'll ensure that the user behavior is correctly understood by the AI. Qualitative user testing. Apart from quantitative user testing, which is done for models, I think qualitative testing is also a really great way of finding out how your users react to a product, how your users interpret the output of the model, how do they feel. It is really important to understand this in context where it will be used. And simple numbers or quantitative testing will usually not reveal the intent or the behavior of why the users accepted or did not accept the particular suggestion. So making sure that you have good, thick data through qualitative user testing will also be helpful. And then appropriate evaluation by in-house experts can be done based on the co-created checklists or standards. Deliver solutions to users. The rollout of a machine learning product can be done in phases, or it can be rolled out to a diverse set of audience. There has to be definitely has to be a particular strategy based on how the model is performing, which area it's working on. So as UX designers, it is also in our area to think about how this particular product should be introduced to the people. On the topic of introduction, more specifically, how the user should be onboarded to the machine learning section or the machine learning-led product is also crucial. Making sure that they develop appropriate mental models about how the ML section works will go a long way in engaging them further in more complex products. However, there also should be option for users to opt out and to reach out for help when needed. Machine learning products are also not static. They evolve as they are fed with more data. So as UX designers, we should make sure we are designing for these feedback loops from the users. Feedback can be implicit or explicit. Implicit feedback is the user actions on the product. It can be a thumbs up, thumbs down. If you have been suggested a song, let's say a user skips a song, that is also a type of implicit feedback. We should also design for explicit feedback to get some rich insights about how the user is feeling about the ML and the AI. Explicit feedback may be comments or ratings, which are more explicit in nature rather than just a user action. So as UX designers, we should make sure that we plan to get both implicit and explicit feedback. We should also identify some success metrics. So for a product like Spotify, I think that's what I was thinking about. It can be the amount of members that they gain over a particular period of time. Now, after the launch, let's say it has been some time that the product has been out there. It's really important to monitor how the product is doing in the wild. Again, a machine learning led product, or any product for that matter, cannot be a piece of software that's out there. It is our responsibility as UX designers to make sure it's actually helping the people. So here are a few things that we can do to continuously improve the value and to make sure that we are able to grow more value with machine-led products. Longitudinal studies. These are studies conducted over a long duration. For example, for recommendation systems, we can conduct a study which sees how the user behavior is when new recommendations are provided to them on the first day versus how users start behaving after 6 months of being recommended items. Are they continuously using the recommended items, or do they now feel the need of trying to discover something out of their taste? So it's really important to conduct long-scale studies. Such studies are really crucial in more critical fields like healthcare and security. Analysis of explicit feedback. So I mentioned previously that we should design for interactions where we are able to collect explicit feedback. It is also important to analyze this qualitative feedback or quantitative feedback and try to understand the user intent behind that. So for example, try to understand why the user gave a 3-star rating versus why a user said this X thing. This will really help understand if the interaction that the user is having with the machine learning model is helping them, is there a particular friction, so on and so forth. The model will also be continuously evolving, so making sure that we can also find a way to add this explicit feedback into the model will be crucial. In the end, benchmark metrics are really helpful in maintaining and checking the user experience of any product. And same applies to any product which has a machine learning or AI component. One of the frameworks is Google's HEART framework. It's widely used. You can use your own benchmarks, your own metrics that you're benchmarking over a long period of time. This will help understand the global effect that's the product or the product change has had on the users. Now let's talk about some pros and cons of collaboration between UX designers and data scientists. I might have touched upon these before, but here's a list. This is not exhaustive by any case. So AI and machine learning development needs to be grounded in human needs. It needs to be accessible to humans. It should do no harm to humans. Involving the UX designer provides a link to connect with users, to connect with user research, and it can help ground the AI products in human needs. Continuously improving UX over time, making sure that we feed the UX metrics back in the machine learning model can help evolve UX over time as a model continuously evolves. So that can lead to improvement of user experience as well. Bringing the two groups together can also bring a great alignment on solving the problem that we had discovered, that's usually found in the discovered phase. So making sure that we get a strong alignment will really be great and will be a side effect of increasing collaboration between UX designer and data scientist. One other benefit, which I think is a really good one, is involving a UX designer can help bridge the gap between the user's mental model and the machine learning model. Slowly and steadily by explaining the model's output or by trying to obscure the model's output in certain cases, we can try to bridge the gap between what users think about this technology and what the technology can do. This will help us evolve the technology and be able to do complex things with technology such that users still can interface with them. Same can be said about digital technology. 40 years ago, I think no one would have imagined using a web browser, and I'm having a lot of trouble with it today. But now that we all are used to some kind of technology, we are more daring to try out new programs and new technology, because our mental models are kind of aligned now. This close collaboration will also help create a common language. This common language can involve metrics, checklists, different abstractions. These can be abstractions of ML or design concepts, and communication through prototypes. These can be both machine learning prototypes, and these can be both more traditional type of prototypes that come out of design and interaction design. It will definitely lead to a more ethical and AI and ML. In some cases, it can avoid misuse of AI, as we have gates like user testing. So let's discuss some cons if the UX designer is absent in this kind of interaction. There can be mismatched mental models where the data scientist may assume that this is how the user perceives the model, but that might be really very far from the actual reality. It may not be grounded in human needs. There might be inaccurate representation of the user in the machine learning. So the way it's mathematically coded might not be right because of lack of any initial user research or lack of artifacts such as personas. Not understanding the context of use can lead to a lot of contextual errors when using the machine learning-led product. A lot of tools are out there today to explore the fairness of machine learning. One of these tools is the what if tool. The what if tool really digs down on user scenarios and tries to analyze if the tool is, if the product is fair or the model is fair. However, for this, a basic understanding of the use case and the user scenarios is pretty important. There will be missed research opportunities and missed user testing opportunities. Now let's talk about some cons. If the data scientist is absent and the UX designer is working on the product design part of it without interfacing with the data scientist. And again, these are a few, there might be many more. The UX designer might not understand the full potential of machine learning, and there might be missed opportunities. There definitely could be inaccurate representations of machine learning and AI, which can go through the ideation and the prototyping and the testing phase, but then it does not match with what the machine learning can do, and there can be a huge point of failure. There can be inaccurate or missing representations for failures that might occur or error states that might occur. Not having the data scientist in the room can also provide a failed opportunity, or it can provide a missing opportunity for building trust with the machine learning model and being able to explain how the model works or why a particular kind of result is shown. So that's all I had today. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Vinita. Despite some like minor difficulties on the technicals, but you're doing great. So we have a couple, yeah, so everyone, if you appreciate what Vinita, Vinita been saying, can you shout out her in the chat so we can say thank you to her collaboratively. So we have a couple questions for you here. Cynthia, are you able to, can I unmute you so you can answer your question in person? Let me find where Cynthia is. Here she is, allowed to talk. Hi, Cynthia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question about like the metrics framework. You talk about like using some metrics for measuring well-being and satisfaction, and I think you mentioned heart. And I'm curious to know if you can suggest other metrics frameworks for us to think beyond the traditional business metrics.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So I think heart is a really good metric for from a product and business perspective. And there are definitely more metrics out there, but I think what you're asking is metrics that are more user focused. So on top of mind, I have some traditional examples from traditional design, which is SUS. SUS is a good one. There are a few versions of SUS actually. So it actually depends on where you are trying to measure it. So if it's a task completion metric, you might be able to find some different types of metrics. It might also depend a lot on your product. So I think if you follow up with me, I'll be able to help you more.
Awesome. Thank you, Vinita. So we have a question from, so we are a little bit over time, but we have one question from Aurelia. Aurelia, I cannot unmute you, just save a time, but like Aurelia have questions about, can you talk more about the Wizard of Oz prototype?
Yeah, sure. So the Wizard of Oz prototype method is a very famous method. What you do is you basically create a functioning prototype emulating AI behavior by actually having a human perform the task of the AI. So for example, if the product does speech to text translation, then I will be interfacing with a product screen where I'll be talking to it. In the real world, the machine learning will do the speech to text and provide me a written text input. But in the Wizard of Oz prototype, someone behind the scenes will be hearing my audio and basically providing me the text representation of what I wrote. So it's an emulation of the AI or machine model capabilities.
Awesome. Thank you, Vinita. So there's 2 more questions for you in the chat. So if you don't mind, can you answer that in the comments? I'm gonna switch to Marli and invite her on the call for her presentation. Thank you, Vinita, again. Awesome work. Hi, Marli.
Hello.
Awesome. Please take it away.
Great. Let me get started. Oh, hang on just a second. Let's try that again. Can you see my screen?
I see it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So I'm Marli Mesibov. I'm a lead content strategist at Verily Life Sciences. I'm really excited to see UX events like this going on through COVID. I think it's really inspiring to see people getting together. And today, talking about AI and the different ways that we interact with it, I want to focus on an area that I think gets a lot of talk, but it's sort of idle talk. We talk a lot, it's easy to find complaints and issues about, oh, AI is biased. But I want to speak about it a little more actionably and talk about why AI ends up being built with bias and what we can do as practitioners in content strategy, in UX, in product design, as project managers, all of that, what we can do to help remove that bias. The thing is, I can't think of a better summary of the ways that technology is intended to be this amazing help and yet can still be a hindrance than a comedy sketch. This is a video that I've given up trying to play in remote digital talks, but you can find it for yourself on YouTube. It's by a comedy group called Burnistown. And in this little video sketch, 2 Scottish men get into an elevator and they find that the elevator has no buttons. Instead of buttons, it's a completely voice operated elevator. And one of the men says in a thick Scottish accent, which I will not attempt to imitate, that they're going to the 11th floor, floor 11. And the elevator responds, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Please state your floor." So the men start to realize that actually the elevator can't understand their Scottish accents. They try imitating various American accents, various British accents. It doesn't work over and over again. And they're stranded in this elevator. And it's hilarious as the stakes get higher and higher for them and their frustration gets higher. And then all of a sudden, at some point, if you work in UX, as we all do, you stop laughing and you realize this is terrifying. This is terrible UX. And it's not that far from reality. No, I don't think any of us have gotten into an elevator anytime recently and found that the only way we had to interact with it was voice UI. But actually, voice UI is in more and more places, and facial recognition and other forms of AI that are intended to make our lives better. And yet they tend to perform worse for women, and in one quote I found, for non-white people. And I want to caveat that quote because what they're referring to is actually non-white American accents. The thing is, when we talk about voice UI as one example, in 2017, a report came out showing that there was a 95% accuracy, 95% recognition of what you were saying. Great. But those stats, first of all, haven't gotten better since 2017, which is fine, 95%, not bad. But it's significantly lower for example, Scottish English. The Burnistown sketch isn't too far off, only 53% accuracy for Scottish English. That's almost half the time misunderstanding what you're saying. And overall, voice UI has a 13% lower accuracy for women than for men. There are other examples, it's not just voice UI. For example, an app that was built by humans and was intended to help women track their periods. Initially was built on the assumption that women track their periods in order to get pregnant. And sure, some women do. Now, Glow is a great app in terms of UI, but it has the same problem that almost every single period tracking app has. The only journeys in their case that they allow you to go on are avoiding pregnancy, trying to conceive, or fertility treatments. And let's be honest, there are many other reasons that a woman would want to track her period, including wanting to prepare to bring pads or tampons with her, including wanting to know if certain mood swings are related to another medication or simply COVID being COVID, or to PMS. There are other health risks and other medications that can impact when you get your period and for how long and how heavily and things like that. And I think it's a pretty good bet that the people who built this app didn't really bring many women into the discussion, that there were not women actively involved in building this app. Then let's look at a more AI form of thing. We've got APIs like Perspective. Now, Perspective was built specifically to recognize toxic behavior in social media. They wanted to be able to scan tweets, for example, and say, remove this tweet, it's toxic. But the data that it pulled in didn't find toxic behavior by being told these are words that are toxic, now go find them, or these are phrases that are toxic. It simply sent out all of the Twitter data and then looked at what was being flagged. And so a couple months later, Perspective started pulling up phrases like, I am a gay Black woman, as toxic. There are a couple reasons this may have happened. It could be that humans who cannot be trusted were flagging statements like that and calling them toxic. This inaccurately teaches the API. Another possibility, which I think is possibly more likely, is that people who were saying toxic things were directing those phrases at, for example, gay Black women. And I'm taking that from this image on the right, which shows that the phrase, I am a gay Black woman, was seen as toxic 87% of the time. So let's imagine for a moment that somebody writes a terrible toxic tweet and says, something, something, you gay Black woman, something, something, horribly offensive phrase. That gets flagged as toxic. Nobody was then going through that data and identifying the part of this tweet that is toxic is this offensive part. And so absent of being guided in that direction, perspective started seeing phrases like, I am a gay woman, I am a gay Black man, I am a gay Black woman, as the problem. Another example, bringing it back to Voice UI, this one from 2019, we've got a woman saying, add Pampers, and instead Alexa heard, add cancer. Examples like this are very frequent. And while I don't see it necessarily as a problem that the overall accuracy has not significantly improved from 2017 to 2020, I do see it as a problem that the accuracy of female voices, the accuracy of non-American accents, the accuracy of non-white American accents is not improving significantly. To quote Rachel Tatum, a data scientist, we're getting into a position where these tools are just more useful to some people than others. In other words, if we don't check ourselves, if we don't identify why our AI is being built in a biased way, we are going to end up with AI being a tool that's just for white American men. And that's not what we want. We want something that's being used for everything, for everyone. So I called this talk, SIRI, You've Got to Be Carefully Taught. And I did that for a few reasons. Predominantly, those of you who are musical theater nerds may appreciate the fact that it comes from a musical called South Pacific, itself with some racist issues in it. But the song specifically is about how children are not naturally biased. They are not racist. They do not see other people and assume that they should hate them because of the way that they look, because of the color of their skin, because of the shapes of their faces. These are things that get taught to them by their parents. There's a quote in the song that to hate the people your relatives hate. And the same is true of our AI. AI was not born biased. It is not that white American men are the intended users of all AI, and the rest of us, the reason that my Voice UI device at home doesn't recognize my voice as well as my husband's is not because these are only intended to be used with male vocal pitches, but they weren't tested enough with female vocal pitches. They weren't tested with higher vocal pitches. And because an AI is made up essentially of how it is trained and then how it is tested, if it is not trained and then tested with higher vocal pitches, it's not going to learn them. And this comes up across the board. It comes up in our AI assistants, which many of us, I'm assuming, are not actually working on, right? There aren't that many AI assistants out there. It also comes up though in our chatbots, and those are far more frequently created. I was working on one a few months ago before I came to Verily, and it was intended to help people plan for leaves of absence from work. One possible reason that you would take a leave of absence is because you're pregnant. And the first recommendation that somebody gave me to make sure that the chatbot said something pleasant in return to being told that the employee taking leave was pregnant. Something like congratulations. I gotta say, I took a step back. There are many, many reasons that people may be pregnant. Some of them are because they want to be pregnant and are happy about it. Some are unexpected blessings. But some reasons are not so happy. And in some areas of the country, you may be planning a maternity leave for a child who you are bringing to term, even though you know that this child is gravely ill and not going to survive. In some areas, in some situations rather, women are planning a maternity leave and are terrified. They're planning leave and they don't know if they'll have enough to cover the time that they're off. There are a lot of financial and keeping your job challenges, lots of issues that come up. There's a lot going on. And so an automatic response of congratulations is based on an assumption, not knowledge. And then there are the apps. Alexa calls them Alexa skills. I believe Google Home calls them apps. There are these things that get downloaded that your company may be building to work within an AI assistant, than a voice UI. These are often built using a combination of branching logic and machine learning. And here as well, particularly when we get into machine learning, we need to be very careful about what we're teaching these systems. For example, I mentioned the API that was looking for toxic content. This is a program that can sense, reason, act, and adapt. Great. But what are we training it to sense? What are we teaching it to reason for? Is somebody going through and scraping that data and making sure that it is guiding the training? When we talk about machine learning being able to improve over time, recognize errors, there still needs to be someone to identify what makes something an error. Is it simply something that doesn't fit with the rest? If that's the case, we're going to end up with any edge case being marked an error. And we're not helping our audience. Let's think about why this biased AI really happens. Well, it comes from a few different places. It comes from a lack of diversity in the teams that are building and testing the systems. And again, while you may not be able to affect SIRI, you can affect the newest chatbot, the next skill or app that gets downloaded. You can make sure that your team is not all white male American speakers. You can make sure that you've got a diverse group of people who are going to bring different assumptions about how people phrase things, about whether a certain phrase is meant as a positive or a negative. I also think biased AI comes from a misunderstanding of what an edge case is. In a perfect world, an edge case means, for example, a design situation that comes out 1 in a million times. How often is somebody going to reach this error page because they are testing for our team and also live in a different country and also made a mistake in creating the error, and so they did want this error page, but they don't know why they got here? That's an edge case. You know what's not an edge case? Low visibility. Only 5% of Americans have visibility issues, but that's a large number of people. That's 1 out of every 20 of your customers. 5% is bigger than it sounds. And so when we talk about building an app for the 80%, when we say, well, most women are very happy to get pregnant, let's congratulate them. You are harming the people who need you the most, who need your app to get it right. We need to make sure that our edge cases aren't, well, plenty of women have low enough voices to be picked up, and also they can always speak with a lower voice. Why are we forcing a workaround when instead we should be creating a solution? So I promise some actionable insights here. You personally can go back to your organization tomorrow and you can make sure that they are hiring diverse teams. You can, one way to do that is actually to think about the mentorship opportunities that you have. It's kind of natural, it's been shown over and over again. There are a lot of reasons that when you pick somebody who does not have as much experience and you choose to mentor them, you tend to pick somebody who looks like you, who sounds like you, who remind you of yourself. Sometimes it's easier for people to connect with someone who might remind them of a younger sibling or a child of theirs, somebody who looks like them. But if we do that, then those of us who are light-skinned and those of you who do have masculine voices or male prominent voices are going to continue bringing people into positions of power who have male voices, who have white skin. The only way to change who is in power is for some of us, our generation of coworkers and colleagues, to make an active effort to choose to mentor people who do not look or sound like us. In the future, if we end up with every possible culture, every possible race, every possible religion, every possible, everywhere along the gender spectrum, every sexuality, every sex, everybody accounted for in positions of power, then sure, that generation can go back to doing what feels perfectly natural, to pick somebody who looks like they did when they were younger. And we'll keep that balance of power. But we can't let ourselves be comfortable with that today. We just can't. We also need to identify our own assumptions. And that's an ongoing practice because assumptions get built over time. There are assumptions that I didn't have 5 years ago. And I thought I'd caught all of my assumptions and I'd noticed all of them. And now I've got new ones. And I have to weed them out all over again. We have to not just say, don't ignore the edge case. We have to actively create our apps to work for the edge case. We have to sometimes do those first because they are the most complex situations. And if you build for 5 different edge cases and you start noticing where they're similar, then you'll start finding where your non-edge case, where your mainstream or whatever you want to call it situation is your most common case. And one of the most important things I find is to make your assumptions explicit. So like if I'm working on an empathy map with a team, I might say, let's write down who this person is, not because we think our audience is all the same, but because if we don't write down that we're assuming that this is a married woman with 2 children, we're going to start putting things onto that empathy map that assume we're talking about a married woman with 2 children. And we never will have identified it. And so then we won't think about the situations where this wouldn't work for someone who isn't married, for someone who doesn't have children. Last thing I'll say about going back to edge cases is there is some great writing by Eric Meyer who talks about how in healthcare specifically, there's no such thing as edge cases. What there are stress cases. And in his example, somebody looking for the hospital ER hours when everything's going well, that might be what we think of as mainstream or norm. That situation where somebody can't be bothered to read anything on the screen because they are so stressed and so panicked and their child is in the ER and they have to get there right now and figure out where the entrance is and how to get in, but they can't even remember that their phone does anything other than scroll. So they can't think to go find the chat help or make a phone call or anything. That's actually possibly more normal. So why are we calling it an edge case? It's a stress case. We need to think of the situations where someone can't give us all their attention because they're stressed. And lastly, we have to keep learning. We have to keep reading. We have to keep looking for more information. Our answer when somebody asks us a question should never be, oh, I know all about that. It should be, here's what I know. What do you know? Who else can we ask? I thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Marli, for this goals awesomeness presentation. This really relevant to me because I work as a voice industry, and all of the things that you said about what as a designer we should do to change the bias and to correct all of the things about voice assumptions and go out there and mentor and find hiring the diverse teams is really hit me on the core. So I'm really this presentation is so rounded that there's no question for coming for, and at least for me, because you sent it us really with all of the actionable items that we could ask for. Thank you so much. Did you see all of the praises that you have in the chat?
I see there's a lot in there. I'm so glad people are excited about this topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, well, thank you for this awesome and well-rounded presentation. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your insights. Okay, I will send Christopher next. Christopher, can you come to the stage? All right. Hi, Christopher. Please take it away.
I'm going to take a moment and share my screen first. All right, well, hard to follow that act with Marli. I just wanted to start off by saying, Marli, your actionable points in terms of getting us to understand diversity in the area of UX exploration, understanding how assumptions get built into that, and to constantly learn. I think it's something that can be applicable in so many areas. So I can't even begin to thank you for your time and your effort to speak to us today. So I just wanted to echo that. So I'm going to change gears a little bit and talk about AI in medicine here today. And my goal is not so much for us to discuss even how research and UX and how we can make things necessarily better. But as you can see here in the title slide, I think it's an interesting point to start to understand the impact of usability and trust. And I think Marli had spoken about it, and our speaker earlier today had also spoken about it, but there's this inherent level of trust that's kind of built into the overall effectiveness of artificial intelligence. And I wanted to be able to speak to that today just a little bit. And so you'll have to excuse the bright glare on my screen, but it's starting to get quite dark here, and you're going to have to bear with me for a little bit. Just to start off with here, as we're all well aware, artificial intelligence has made a quite the substantial impact in a number of medical specialties, some of which longer than others. And obviously, for that reason, it's been adopted to a varying degree throughout. And now personally, I come from a medical background. I've been in the medical device industry from a human factors and usability standpoint, and from an R&D standpoint for about the last decade of my career. And so it's been fascinating to see this development in technology, but then also to continue to see this incorporation of artificial intelligence. And so the spin that we're going to take here today is not necessarily looking at areas such as the impact of voice recognition software, or even being able to take dictations and to drive data from that. But again, this concept of trust is something that I want to talk about more so today. And so there's this interesting paper that was written in terms of documenting trust and perceived usability. And the quote here is, "Trusting technology can be supported or prevented by the perceived usability. Low-level usability could compromise an individual's trust and use of the technology." And I want us to just take a moment to let that sink in, right? And so we generally in UX, I think in this exploration of UX, I think you have this feeling of, did they like it or not? But in med device industry that I'm in, it doesn't really matter too much if they like it, to be honest. What really matters is two things. Could they do it safely, and could they do it effectively? But only now, as you start to incorporate artificial intelligence more and more, is this element of trust really coming into play. And so imagine you potentially being a physician, or imagine your physician being fed data that was driven by some sort of artificial intelligence. I want you to think to yourself, could I trust that information that's being provided for me? And if not, how can I trust it more? And I think the interesting part there is the impact of usability in gaining trust. And I think that's the twist that I like to take our conversation on today. This is going to be a very familiar diagram because Marli had actually brought it up just a few moments ago. But our version of this is, I want to start off by first making sure that we have this ground plate of what AI is, and then how machine learning gets incorporated into it, and what deep learning is, because I think there is the tendency to have this overall misunderstanding in some ways. And I think Marli did an excellent job to explain elements of that, but I want to put a healthcare twist on it as well. But overall, you have this overarching bubble of artificial intelligence that is inclusive of both machine learning, and then on the next image, you'll see deep learning, right? And then so what you'll see is that there's these overlapping elements where you have additional learnings that occur, and you have artificial intelligence being a primary impact on things like diagnostics, on things like treatment methodologies, and surgical robotics, which you're going to see here in just a moment. And so on this screen, you'll see that there's this kind of impact of surgical robotics and artificial intelligence, right? Well, at the end of the day, at least right now, for the foreseeable future, surgical robotics is an area where you're still going to have a surgeon, for the most part, sitting in the back room manipulating in some fashion or another, right? There are going to be people who need to set the robotics up, who need to be in the room and positioning it on the patient, and then potentially repositioning it on the patient. So there's this constant level of human interaction with that level of technology. And then not only that, when you start to incorporate artificial intelligence, that's when you start to think about, well, what if we can incorporate goggles, or what if we can incorporate tactile feedback in the surgical procedure, and what that looks and feels like from an artificial intelligence standpoint. But in recent history, what we're seeing now is this incorporation of machine learning and deep learning, in fact, in radiology, pathology, and even internal medicine. I'm going to start to speak to that a little bit more as well. So let's start with surgical robotics. It's a little bit of an easier answer. First of all, in terms of the last few years, the overall growth in terms of AI-assisted robotic surgery has escalated quite significantly, almost exponentially. And in fact, the technological advancements in surgical robotics are predicted to just continue to explode. So, kudos to you if you happen to have stock in any of these areas. It's probably a relatively safe bet. But what I want to go back on here from a surgical robotics perspective is to think about it from, again, this component of trust, right? I would assume that there's a good portion of the individuals in the call here today that have played video games to some extent or another, right? And if you might recall, even going back to one of the very first video games, there's this thing called Pong. It's an Atre game where the ball drops and you have to move the bar here or there, right? People never had experienced this type of technology in game before, but there was this level of trust in that if I move this control this way, then the bar is going to go that way. And if I move it the other way, then the bar is going to go that way. And then you start to figure things out. Well, oh, if I make it bounce here, then it will take a certain angle. Or if I move it faster to the left, then it might start to make a ball skid and do these other things. And you start to figure these things out, right? Well, now let's take it to the step of 35 years, 40 years later, to the point of surgical robotics, right? It's a glorified video game. How fun could that be? Don't we all want to be surgeons now? And so from this standpoint, now you're exploring, okay, well, how will I know if I move this joystick here that I'm going to be moving that product, that scalpel, that point 1 millimeter down? And then God forbid the surgeon makes a mistake, right? Well, imagine you're holding a scalpel in your hand and you kind of feel a tear, right? You can kind of imagine what that might feel like. If you cut through some vegetables with a knife or cut through a piece of meat, you kind of know what the difference feels like. You might start to cut through different parts of the muscle or different parts of the vegetable. You can see and feel different things. But imagine you're not directly handling that. And then you get into a scenario where you made a tear, but you might not immediately recognize it until, in fact, it's too late. You see bleeding, and then the remedy is just exponentially worse. But a surgeon on the spot, they can feel that happen. And before any type of negative reaction, they can try to do their best to fix it on the spot. And so again, there's this constant level of can I trust this machine to do what I want it to do? And how much can I trust this machine to, in fact, then do things on my behalf? How much can I then trust this machine to do more than I would even think about? And so you start to think about imaging, and you start to think about, well, not only the area of tactile feedback, but now let's talk about some of these other potential challenges that exist. So in surgical robotics, there's this point of setting everything up, right? And so immediately from a usability standpoint, one of the first things that come to your mind should be, oh, of course, the surgeon is the one who uses it. Maybe also the nurse is the one who uses it. But oftentimes when people just start to think about much later on, when they could have been thinking about it earlier, is this point of setup. Well, it's much more intricate than you might have thought. The robotic system typically has to be just kind of set up deeply within the patient in certain aspects and has to be leveraged in different ways. And so the setup process is very detailed and can oftentimes take quite a long time. And so one of the things that a lot of the surgical robotic firms and manufacturers around this country and around the world are working on is how do we make that setup process easier and faster? But as we know in this industry, what happens when you start to make things quote unquote easier and quote unquote faster, right? Inherently, you're trying to take an X number of steps and reduce it and just smash it into a smaller number, right? So then you're introducing a whole nother layer of potential errors. So you have your usability challenges that exist there from incorporating this element of surgical robotics. And then again, overall, just this element again of trust. You know, how can we get surgeons to better trust that this is indeed going to help them, and how this is going to provide better outcomes for their patients, and ultimately how, you know, when it comes to trust, how can we get the surgeon to trust the product, and how can we get patients to trust it as well, and ultimately is the patient going to have a better outcome at the end of it. Next, in terms of radiology. Now, machine learning, that's an obvious, it should be relatively obvious in terms of its potential impact in the field of radiology. And in fact, recent literature out of Stanford suggests that the utilization of AI in radiology has increased accuracy to 2 to 3%, which may not seem like a lot to you, but when you look at it from the standpoint of any given radiologist can be looking at hundreds of images in any given day, that there is, in any given day, let's say they look at 100 pictures and let's just give it on average on 3 days. And out of the 100, you know, you could get 2 or 3 with better accuracy, with less mistakes. That's a huge, huge deal, and constant churn of these images as well. And so I wanted to talk about, when it comes to radiology, the specific challenge of education, right? And so it's interesting to think about education and usability in this type of way. But one of the things that you might hear from radiologists is, how do I really know that it's looking for a tumor when I actually, instead of looking at an artifact or a bunch of just kind of misshapen pictures and black and whites that wasn't supposed to be there because a patient was moving during the MRI. And so one of the big complaints is, well, radiologists, they just don't know how to interpret all this data. They don't know where it came from. They don't have any understanding of what it means. What is an algorithm? I don't even know. How do I understand what some computer programmer sat at a desk all day did, looking at black and whites and ones and zeros, where I've been trained for 25 years to know that that's going to be a tumor and that's not a tumor, and that's an artifact because a patient was moving and that was not. So there's this constant, again, this level of trust. How can we get physicians to better trust technology? Well, I think it's a usability challenge that comes with better education. How can we speak to these terms in terms that can get a radiologist to understand how the machine learning and deep learning technologies went from point A to point B to point C in a reliable fashion? And then also now internal medicine. So now you're seeing technology in the area of diabetes care and any type of internal medicine diagnostics. You're seeing it as a method to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to then drive decisions in diagnostics, right? So when a physician is making a decision in his or her mind, he or she is making a declaration to say, well, based on my knowledge of of the information that I've taken from your patient history, and then from there, from the knowledge that I can gather based on what's happening, what you're suffering from right now, and then the other kind of missing components that we might not have talked about, how can I bring all of that together in such a way to then create a potential for diagnoses with levels of percentages to say within X number of, for example, 85% accuracy, I can predict, the machine learning can predict that this patient has X diagnosis. And so that's an interesting way to start to think about the component of how machine learning is really going to impact it into the future. And it's crazy because physicians are so scared of this. And, you know, there's this this notion that the more that you incorporate artificial intelligence, you're actually getting rid of doctors. When in fact, actually, as Steve Lin put it, you know, if done wisely, the incorporation of artificial intelligence can actually free up the physician cognition, the emotional space for patients, and shift the focus away from these transactional tasks, right? When you went to a doctor's office, how often were you frustrated when the physician was kind of sitting in his or her corner, typing away, facing off to the side away from you, when in fact you just wanted to have a conversation with the person about your state? And so I think there are these elements of kind of being able to incorporate technology to then incorporate artificial intelligence to then allow the physician to be a better interaction point with the patient. And so again, you're having these areas of trust that are constant challenges to address and to face. And then from embedding, and then also finally, what I'd love to do and love to see more of is to just take usability principles, good testing principles that in fact Marli has spoken to, Vinita has spoken to as well, taking these overall good research practices and incorporating that more in medicine apart from just the safety and efficacy that I'm hearing on a daily basis, of course. And so when it comes to some potential solutions, I wanted to see how, just talk about ultimately in conclusion, how trust and usability are really super, just this closely tied together, not only in medicine, but overall AI in general. And so the thought here is how can we then increase our technological capacity while not promoting a distrust against the machine? You know, similar to, you know, all the zombie movies that you see coming out there, what's the source? Some scary vaccine. And what did that do? It created this general mistrust, right, of the vaccine, that for other reasons potentially as well. Well, think about the Terminator movies, if any of you have seen those, right? In those movies, what happens? Oh, artificial intelligence takes over the world, right? And so if you look at it from the standpoint of distrust against the machine, how can we promote trust better? And I think there are a lot of the factors we spoke of here in terms of giving the appropriate levels of education, in terms of allowing physicians to better understand what it means and how the data is translated, and to really incorporate that feedback, I think is a big part of it. And a couple of closing thoughts. I'd like for us to continue in the medical field as we incorporate artificial intelligence, put just as much emphasis on that human interaction point as we do on the technology. Like taking surgical robotics, for example. Let's really think about the surgeon, not only what the surgeon is doing, but let's start to think about what the surgeon is feeling. How do they trust it? How can we get them to trust it more? Constantly incorporate usability testing early and often in all aspects of the technology. Talk to the physicians you're looking to seek. You're actually trying to help, right? So instead of exclusively talking to the programmers and those who are writing those fantastic algorithms, but actually go out there and talk to the people, right? Go out there and talk to the physicians and say, look, not only can you use the thing safely and effectively, but what is your barrier to not using it, or to using it in the future rather? What can we do better to help you trust this technology, for you to want to incorporate it? And how can this lead to better outcomes ultimately for the patient as well? And then finally, again, talked about education a lot, but how can we better create material that's geared towards clinicians who have little to no understanding of that deep learning and AI, and how to get them to better understand how that works? And I think finally, I just want to emphasize, I think what we ultimately want to do is make healthcare easier and more accessible to everyone through artificial intelligence.
That's awesome. Thank you for these actionable items too, Chris. I think that we have 3 questions here from Josephine. I think I can unmute her. Josephine, can I unmute you? I'm just gonna unmute you for a second so you can ask your question in person. Hi,
I'm unmuted.
Hi, Josephine, you are unmuted. Can you ask your question?
Let's see. Yeah, I can ask them. So my first question is, why not build trust by providing evidence? For example, showing that AI can identify tumors with greater accuracy than a human.
Yeah, so I see your question there, Josephine, and I agree, right? So there's certainly the data to support it. So there's two things in play there, I would say. One of which is simply the fact that they, as normal human beings, they're feeling as if their jobs are being taken away. So there's already this level of these walls and this level of apprehension that's being put up in front of them, right? And then to show that, yes, through artificial intelligence, we're showing that there is increased accuracy in detection of tumors and different abnormalities. But from the standpoint of trust, there is this standpoint that, well, how do I really know that even that data is accurate? How can I really see that, how without my own eyes, I've been doing this from a diagnosis standpoint for the last X number of years in my career. How can I, without even looking at it, take a scan that an artificial intelligence has read through, and then be able to comfortably translate that into the treatment modality for the physician or the care person? So there's this, I would say, to answer your question specifically, Josephine, that there's this level of a barrier of this initial wall that's been put up in terms of, well, I don't really know if this is something that can be used to then overcome that barrier in a more inclusive way. And I think Stanford and MIT have actually done a pretty good job in trying to make headways for that.
Fair enough.
So, Josephine, you have another questions, right? Is that there? Is that there?
Right. I'll ask my other question, which I've had for a while now. I've worked in the AI area for a while, and UX as well. So my question is, why I still wonder why trust is coming up now as an issue around technology, just to frame it a little bit, with the emergence of AI. So I guess part of my question is, why weren't trust issues coming up in, say, IT before the emergence of AI? You see what I'm saying?
I do. And, you know, I think unfortunately it's more or less a rush to technology. And I think as UX designers, everyone sees it. You know, there's this rush and there's this constant battle. And it seems to be this parallel battle behind development that's always trying to run this race faster and faster than the other developers around them, and then actually providing good holistic research to support and back those claims, right? So in the case of radiology, I think there is some initial first studies that showed a very varied level of accuracy. And then so there's this constant race and push against that. And then that versus kind of then trying to gain the trust of the physician from a radiology standpoint as well. So I think similar to what you face in the UX industry overall, not apart from just medicine, there's this constant battle behind development and good research backing that development, and not going too fast and on top of each other, and being more supportive of one another.
So it sounds like you're tying it to this notion of just the impact of technology on individuals and the medical field in particular, but also on society. So it sounds to me like you're saying that people need time to adjust as new technologies emerge. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, Josephine, that would be about correct. I think similar to any new technology, particularly as it's introduced to you know, certain types of individuals, there is much less likelihood of adaptation and willingness to adopt new technologies, particularly in surgery, particularly in radiology, in some of these areas where there are areas, for example, in diabetes care, technology is very well adapted, is very well received. So part of it is kind of a little bit of maybe, you know, for lack of a better way of saying it, there's kind of an old dog territory where, you know, physicians and surgeons say, I've been doing this for 30 years and I know exactly what I'm doing and I don't need some robot to help me do that, versus the new, younger kind of generation coming in saying, hey, wait a minute, I grew up with an Apple Watch attached to my arm. I think we can start to utilize some of these technologies.
Thank you. That's very helpful information. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Christopher. Thank you, Josephine, for your questions. I think that we're running out of time a little bit. I can take like Christopher, if you don't mind, you have a couple more questions lined up. If you can you answer that by comments while we're gonna do the raffle at the same time? Ben, do you mind to announce our winners for raffle?
Hey, no problem, John. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. So we've got a couple awesome books courtesy of Rosenfeld Media. The first one is Why We Fail. And the winner of that book is Aravind Jembu Rajkumar. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. I see you in the attendee list. So Chong, what information do we need to get from them so we know how to, do we need anything or do we have it all in the?
So the winner, if you don't mind, we can connect you through emails and we're gonna send you to the book, and we're gonna need basically your address, no matter where you are in the world. So we're gonna send you your book.
Awesome. All right, congrats. The second book is Liminal Thinking, and that winner is Wen Proferi. So congrats, Wen. All right, and the third book is Design for Care. And let's see if this person is still here. Yes, Aisa Feldman. Again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing everyone's names horribly. Congratulations. So we will reach out to you via email and get you these books. And with that, pass it back to you, Chong. Do you want to wrap it up?
Yes, I will wrap it up. Awesome. Thank you everyone for this awesome event. I appreciate all of you and your time. I'm glad. I hope that you all learn and find all of the talk insightful as we all do. Since our last event, I want to take this opportunities to, on behalf of PhillyCHI Board 2020, Ben, Michelle, Lorraine, Christine, can you show up your face? So on behalf of our board 2020, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your endless support throughout the year. I think we couldn't make this without you all. 2020 has been really a challenging year for us, and as we all know, but also it's been really rewarding for us too, because we will be able to bring everyone together, share knowledge, and most and foremost, with this platform, we use a platform to show what we stand for, not only on the local level, but on the international level too. So this is your support. It's been the biggest gift for us for 2020, and 2020 is our 15-year anniversary. So thank you for that. We will be back next year on 2021 with a brand new team. So stay tuned. And last and not least, I say this every time, but I keep gonna say it again. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected. Okay? I'll see you all pretty soon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Dear speakers, can you hang on a little bit so we can have a little chat? Vinita, are you still here, Christopher?
Yes.
Yep, I'm here.